Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. Right now, the outside temperature is about 14 degrees, and the real feel is probably about 3 degrees. So I've been trying to think warm. So I came up with the perfect video topic today: the ins and outs of nature study. While I know that there are people who do nature studies year round, where we live, it gets really, really cold in the wintertime. So outdoor nature study isn't really something that we're likely to do unless we're having a more mild day. So when I think about nature study, I'm kind of reminiscing back to maybe a month or two ago when we were actually able to go to the canal or to the bike trail and to actually enjoy the outdoors. But I know that there are a lot of people who are really confused about what nature study is. And that's how I felt about it at first too. I wasn't really sure. Whenever I heard about nature study, it was usually when it had to do with the Charlotte Mason method of homeschooling. I think that the Charlotte Mason method is what actually made nature study really popular in the homeschool community. Although nature study is definitely utilized by so many different types of homeschoolers. So what I'm going to share with you today are just some ideas on doing nature study. I'm going to share with you just some information to maybe help you to understand more of what it is. This video is not going to be all-encompassing about everything that nature study is, because there's just too much area to cover, because everyone will do it differently. So what I'm going to share with you today are maybe just things that can give you a starting off point, or if you're already doing nature study, I have like hair in my eye. Anyway, if you're already doing nature study and just want something, to freshen it up a bit, or something to breathe new life into it, maybe what I talk about will give you some new ideas. So anyway, where can nature study happen? Nature study, first of all, let me just say that nature study is the study of anything that is in the natural world. So that could be weather, it could be clouds, it could be animals, it could be fish, insects, it could be even rocks, different types of rocks. So geology, it could be plants, trees, flowers. It basically includes anything in nature that does not include human beings. So again, where can this take place? Well, it can take place right in your own backyard. It can take place in your front yard, your side yard. It can take place in your neighborhood, or at a local playground. You can do nature study. If there are areas surrounding the playground that, are grassy areas that you will encounter things obviously from nature. You can do nature study at a park, at a creek, at a beach. You can, of course, take field trips to do your nature studies. And yes, there are times that you can actually do nature study indoors, and I'm going to be addressing that as well today. So basically, there are 3 categories of nature study, the way that I see it. This isn't something that is written in stone, and it's never really something that I've seen discussed anywhere. Although I'm going to be honest, I haven't read too much about nature study. What I have learned about nature study is simply through doing it. But the 3 categories of nature study that I have come to realize exist, at least for us, are more structured nature studies, and then there's a relaxed nature study, and then there are what I call rainy day nature studies. So first of all, let me just get into the structured nature study. This is the nature study that I think a lot of people envision when they're thinking about the Charlotte Mason method. Charlotte Mason was very meticulous about nature study, and she was also adamant about making sure that children spend at least some time outdoors every day, no matter the weather. And so very often in a Charlotte Mason homeschool, you will see kids who have some sort of a nature study notebook. So this is one of my kids' nature study notebooks. And Charlotte Mason would often have her students maybe sit down and draw something that they saw maybe a flower or a tree, but they would have to put lots of detail into it. This was something that they really took their time on and that they really put a lot of effort into. She would also sometimes have actual lessons in the natural things that were surrounding them. So that is one thing about structured nature study. Structured nature study will often have an actual agenda, like there's an actual specific topic or reason that the nature study will be happening that day. So sometimes this could be specific lessons that will be comprising the nature study that day. It could be different activities that are going to be happening. Sometimes I've heard of some families who will actually prepare some watercolors and get some watercolor paper, sometimes even easels if they're driving somewhere to do their nature study, and they will pull everything out and they will do a watercolor of things that they see. And so that's really another thing about structured nature studies. It's very often things that take preparation. It's not like a spur of the moment thing, like an impromptu nature study. This is something that very often takes a lot of thought, and a lot of people enjoy doing it this way. Gardening is also another one that I would consider to be a structured nature study, simply because of everything that you need to put into gardening. But yes, gardening can definitely be part of a nature study. Now, first of all, I do want to show you this book here, Handbook of Nature Study. I have talked about it in a few of my videos, and this came highly recommended to me. And as you can see, this is a really thick book, and in this book there are actual lessons that give you information or ideas on things to do for nature study. It will give you just summaries of the different things that are going to be studied, sometimes even stories. It will include some book suggestions, activity suggestions, and this is extremely extensive. Now, I would caution you of trying to use this as like a curriculum, because again, it's this thick. And so the very first time that I saw it, I was a bit overwhelmed, because even though there were so many people who told me that this is the perfect nature study book and that everyone who does nature study needs this, I kind of wanted to just hide it the first time that I saw it, because when I am confronted with too much information, I just want to look the other way. So I will tell you that I do not use the actual lessons that are in this book, and I'll just get into it a little bit later about how I use this book. But yeah, if you are looking for something that you can do structured nature study with, this has tons of ideas. But again, I'm going to caution you, don't try to use it one lesson at a time. You'll make yourself crazy. Think of a topic that you and your kids would enjoy, and then you can look in the index in the back of this book, and you can find the information or the lessons that it includes for that specific topic, but don't ever think that you have to do this whole thing. So anyway, that is one idea for a more structured nature study. Now, the next category is relaxed nature study, and that is very often more of what our family does, because I've got a lot of kids, so sometimes doing all of that additional preparation is just too much for us. And I've noticed that the more structured nature study lessons often take a lot of time, and sometimes time isn't something that we have a lot of here. So with relaxed nature studies, this is kind of where you just go with the flow. So for us, a nature study day would be just going to the creek and wading in there and looking for tadpoles, or looking for the little clams that are in there, or looking for minnows. And this isn't, I rarely have an actual agenda where I tell my kids, okay, I want you to go find a cluster of frog eggs. That doesn't happen. I don't usually tell the kids what I want them to do. When we are out in nature, it's all very organic. The kids just explore and find things on their own. And I rarely have to tell them, okay, you need to start doing something. Because when my kids are outside, that is like where they belong. They love that. That is their environment. So a relaxed nature study could also be something as simple as a nature study walk, or not a nature study walk, sorry, a nature walk, where you might just walk down a bike path. My kids like walking down the bike path. They also like walking down the canal by our house. And again, this isn't something where you have to specifically do things while you're on that nature walk. Just pay attention to your surroundings. Point things out to your kids. You know, if you see tracks on the ground, show it to them. If you see maybe a cocoon or a chrysalis in a tree somewhere, show it to them. And then you could maybe discuss, you know, metamorphosis with them, or caterpillars, moths, butterflies. And it is really something that naturally happens as you're out and about with your kids. And so that could, the nature walk itself, depending on where you live, it could even happen just in your very own neighborhood. It needn't be fancy for your kids to get in touch with nature. You know, they step outside and they're outside, they're in nature. Even if you're in the city, you're going to see birds flying around. You're likely going to see squirrels, or maybe chipmunks, skunks. You know, there is nature to be found everywhere. So just, you know, there's a saying that says, bloom where you are planted. And I love that. And just take advantage of your area, no matter where you are, and find the things that you love about it and show them to your kids. So anyway, that's what a relaxed nature study day could look like. It could just be anything to get your kids in touch with nature. I didn't get to show you more of the nature study book that I have for my kids. Sometimes my kids might take a nature study journal on one out of our relaxed nature study days. So when they do that, it is completely up to them what they write in it. It can be any topic that they want. So for example, here my daughter just wrote some things that she saw: tulip trees, cars, not really nature, but she saw it, she wrote it. Clouds, birds, a white cherry blossom tree, and tulips. And here she just wrote about what happened at the creek when they were there. And right here I'm going to show you, she actually took one of our notebooking pages. I very often will print out a bunch of notebooking pages from, it used to be called notebookingpages.com. Now it's called productivehomeschooling.com. And I usually have a thick folder of notebooking pages there, and some of those are nature study notebooking pages. So what she did here was she took one that on cloud observations. So she glued it right into her journal here, and she observed the clouds. And it looks like she did it over an extended period of time from March to July. So, you know, just because you have a nature study journal doesn't mean that you have to make it something really, really intricate. If you are more, you know, of the structured nature study homeschoolers, then yes, there are specific things, specific topics that you can tell your kids that you want them to do each day. Or you can take our approach and just let your kids have fun with their nature study journals and just have them make it their own and just write about the things that they find interesting. So next, I'm going to get into the rainy day nature study. So I think that a lot of times people associate all nature studies as being outside because, yeah, that's where nature is. But there are definitely going to be days that it just, the weather is not conducive to being outside. Yes, I know that Charlotte Mason said to have kids outdoors in all kinds of weather, but when you have as many kids as I do, and one of them is immunocompromised, you kind of try to keep them from getting sick as much as possible. So yeah, on those days where it's raining outside, or where it is 14 degrees with a real feel of 3, or if there are like blizzard-like conditions outside, having an inside nature study is something that you can do. So some things that you could do for an inside nature study are to watch a nature documentary. You could watch a longer one, like on Netflix. Sometimes they have them that are like 45 minutes long. But there are other ones, like on YouTube, there's one called Brave Wilderness. It's Coyote Peterson. His videos are all like 10 minutes long, but they are usually about families. I cannot think today. They are usually about animals although animals do have families. But anyway, they're about animals, and he always keeps them really, really interesting, and my kids love watching him. So definitely videos are something that you can work into an indoor nature study. Some other things that you can do are notebooking pages, like what I talked about, how I keep notebooking pages in a folder. And my kids know that they can go into that folder anytime they want, and they can take out a notebooking page. Now, some of the notebooking pages that I print out are just, generic ones that can be used for anything. But I also keep nature study ones printed too. So for example, the cloud observation one that I showed you, I usually have ones on plants printed out where there might be a picture of a plant and then it has lines for them to label it. Sometimes there might be notebooking pages on certain types of animals, and you're supposed to research the animal and write things about it. So just doing notebooking pages on something in nature still counts as nature study. Now let me just show you. So my daughter is doing the Thinking Tree, the Animal Lovers Fun Schooling Journal. And yes, this can count as nature study. Animals are a part of nature, correct? So as you can see here, that's what she's doing in here, is working in this Animal Lovers notebook. And this is nature study. It's also science. I think a lot of times people forget that nature study covers science. So that is a plus when it comes to nature study, especially if you have kids who don't like textbooks, but who do like to be outside or who do like to learn about the natural world. Another idea along the lines of the notebooking pages that I was telling you about is to have your kids do some sort of an actual notebook in itself, like not just getting pages and gluing them into their nature study journal, but maybe having them do an entire notebook on something that is nature study related. Like my daughter here has this animal notebook here. And again, these animal notebooks, they're nature study. She's learning about things that God created that are out there in the natural world. So that is another idea that you can have your kids do for nature study on those rainy days when you just won't be going outside. Another idea is for you just to read to your kids about different things in nature. You can pick a topic that you want to learn about with your kids or that your kids are really interested in, and you can read to them, whether it's a library book, whether it is a book that you have in the house. Even this book that I was telling you about here, the Handbook of Nature Study, there are things that you could read to your kids right from here. Like for example, here this is about the skunk. And it just starts out with, those who have had experience with this animal surely are glad that it is small. And the wonder always is that so little a creature can make such a large impression upon the atmosphere. So even in this book, there are excerpts or little stories that you could read to your kids for nature study, or you could have them read it to themselves, or they could research things that they're interested in. But, it's really just about thinking outside the box and realizing that nature study doesn't have to happen outdoors. And one last thing that I'm just going to mention that can happen on like a rainy day nature study would be to have your kids reproduce nature related art. Maybe if you have some fruit in the refrigerator, you could have your kids draw it in detail. Or if you have flowers, if you have a plant, or if you have a pet who will sit still long enough, you could have your kids draw or paint the animal. Or even getting back to the fruit, you could have your kids dissect fruit or dissect seeds. Look inside the seeds. What is it that is inside of it, and see if they can look up what those little parts of the seed are called. So many ideas on indoor nature studies. So moving on from that, the last thing that I really wanted to talk to you about are just some supplies that you can have on hand for a nature study. And again, this is not an extensive list of nature study supplies. This is just some things to give you some ideas. But yeah, I'm sure that you will think of many, many more things that I did not mention here. So first of all, if you're going to be having your kids do a nature study journal, you want to get them obviously some sort of journal. Some people do go out there and they actually buy their kids sketchbooks. Some people buy their kids journals that are specifically for nature studies. Since I have so many kids, I just went to Dollar Tree and got composition books. And then I had my kids just use a cardstock to decorate the outside cover of it to make it their own. You want to find good pencils. I always recommend Ticonderoga, or even colored pencils if you think that your kids are going to want to draw while they are outside. It's good to have something that you don't have to worry too much like about the tip breaking, something that is high quality. I will say that with my kids, I don't ever plan for them to like draw while they're outside doing nature study. Even though my kids love to draw, what I found is that my kids, when they're doing nature study, they want to explore. They don't want to sit down and just draw or just write something. Very often they might bring something home with them, like maybe a flower or a leaf or a pine cone, or they might come home and then write about it later. I do have one child, he likes to take his journal with him, and very often when the kids are running around doing whatever they're doing during the nature study, he will sit down and he will write about the things that he sees. But if your kids aren't going to sit still, that's not like a prerequisite to nature study. You don't have to have your kids sit down and draw things. Very often they can do that on their own when they get home, or they can choose to not draw at all. So something else that is really important for you to have in nature study are books. Not just for those indoor nature study days, but even when they're outside, because very often they might find something while they're out there doing a nature study and they might want to find out more about it. So, sometimes you could take them to the library to look these things up, but very often if you're outside for a nature study, sometimes you're gone for a good amount of time. And the last thing that you want to do is come home and have to go to the library, so it's good to have some books on hand that your kids can use for references. So that is how we specifically use this book. I told you before that I don't use it for the lessons because I find them to be a bit overwhelming. But one thing that I love about this is that if my kids find something that they're really interested in, or if they just want to learn about a specific animal or plant or flower, they just look in the index here, and they can find lots of useful information in here. So that is really how we use this. So it's good to have books around the house that your kids can use. Some other books that you might want to have are just like some nonfiction books. So this one my kids actually got at a school. It was on the discard pile. The school had put like a whole bin of books out that they no longer wanted, so they were free. So my kids got this book on clouds. We have this book here on rainforest animals. Here's another one on mammals. This one is wildlife of the forest. So this one is more of a, like a heavier reference book. We've got one on snakes here. Whoops, I'm ready to like knock all of these off the table. We've got snakes. And then here we have a library book on volcanoes, because volcanoes are they're included in nature study as well. So so those are just some ideas for books that you can have around the house, just especially if your kids are interested in certain things and they seem to gravitate back to those topics all the time. Then it's definitely a good idea to have at least some of those books on those topics in your house, so that you don't have to worry about running to the library all the time, especially on days when your time is running short. Now, besides the Handbook of Nature Study book, it's also nice to have some other books for you as the parent to use as a reference, or for you to get ideas on things to do with your kids. So this book here is called Nature Watch, Exploring Nature with Your Children. And this book has different activity ideas for you to do with your kids that have to do with nature. Like, for example, make a hedgehog shelter, make a tasty snack. It talks about snails here following their trail. This book was actually, a subscriber sent me a box full of goodies, and this was one of the things that she sent me. And this, I cannot wait until it's warm enough to actually start doing some of the activities in it. So another book that I got for myself, just as a reference to do with my kids, was No waste kitchen gardening. Regrow your leftover green stalks, seeds, and more. And this is something else that I cannot wait to start to do with my kids. And it just shows you how to use your leftover vegetables and to actually regrow them so that you can grow your own food. And this is great for people who don't have like a big yard, or if you live in a city, you can still do these things in your house. So this is just another idea of something that you could do with your kids for nature study. And again, here is the book of gardening projects for kids. I did do some of this with my kids last year. We actually had a lot of fun in this, and it's 101 ways to get kids outside, dirty, and having fun. And my kids adored the activities that we did in here. So yeah, so it's just a good idea to have things like that so that you always have fresh ideas in your mind, so that it's not always like on you to think of something to do with your kids. So besides books and besides the journal and the pencils and colored pencils that I talked about, you know, just things like binoculars or a magnifying glass, maybe a telescope, just things for them to look at things up closely. You might want to have your kids each have a backpack that they can take with them, especially if they're going to be taking a journal and pencils and colored pencils. They're also nice for if you are on a nature walk, for example, and your kids are collecting things. My kids always collect things, and then they always expect me to carry all of their stuff for them. And then by the time that we get home, like, my pockets are jammed with their stuff, because half the time I don't even know it, and they're putting stuff in my pocket. And yeah, I don't even notice. So then when we get home, they can't even tell whose is whose anymore. And very often, like, the leaves are crumbled. And anyway, that's why it's nice to have a backpack for your kids. So when they are collecting things, they can just keep all of their stuff right inside their own backpack. And then there are no mix-ups or hopefully crumbled leaves. So another idea is to have contact paper. Those are nice for when your kids are collecting those specimens. Or, you know, if they're collecting flowers that they find, they can use contact paper and cardstock to make little bookmarks. Those are nice to press flowers and use the contact paper for that. So those are also pretty gifts. And I'm just going to mention it again. Nature study notebooking pages. It's nice to just have a bunch of them printed up so that your kids can just choose one whenever they want to, or whenever you tell them we're going to do a nature study notebooking page today. It's nice to have them on hand so that you don't have to print them up at the last minute. So anyway, those are all of the ideas that I could come up with for nature study. I hope that it explained nature study a little bit better to you if you weren't really sure what it is. But that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram, because YouTube disabled my comments. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.